judges, 19th area of domestic policy. By this really I mean legal affairs, the affairs to do with the legal profession and its practice on one hand, and constitutional affairs on the other. To do with legal affairs, I need to know a lot more about it, and I'd be very grateful for those who'd be prepared to explain to me what the live issues in the legal profession are. But I can see that there has been a recent issue on how judges are appointed, to make sure that that is representative of society as a whole, but not sort of captured by the government or the executive. I'm not sure where we got to on that one. Legal aid. It costs quite a lot, but it's really important that people should feel that they do, in fact, in practice, have access to the courts and to justice, particularly so that they don't feel like taking things into their own hands. And there've been courts closed recently, but I think that there are delays in getting people into court often. I'm not quite sure whether that really is a practical issue. Then there's a lot of litigation, and I don't think that obviously there does need to be justice, but it's not an attitude that we want to encourage in society, and I'm not sure whether there are practical steps that we can take and fairly can take to reduce the tendency to go to litigation in cases where it really may be better to accept that human beings make mistakes. Then there's the issue of whether we have a written constitution or not, and I know this is something that we have not historically done in Britain, and I'm not completely au fait with the pros and cons of having one, but I think the historic situation is probably the right one to go with, but I'm not completely sure of the arguments in favour and against. I don't know whether we should have a written constitution or not. There's a lot of talk about the Human Rights Act, which we engaged in, which we adopted because of Europe, and people seem irritated that we can't banish people from the country who've done things wrong. It's another issue that I want to understand the sort of arguments on both sides of better. Then there's also the issue of ID cards, and whether we should be a society in which we can be stopped in the street and asked to identify ourselves, or have a card which positively affirms our identity. There's also an issue as to whether that actually would work, whether it could be forged, and so on, how frequently that system would make mistakes, and whether civil liberties mean that really it's better if we can trust each other. It's a difficult one, this. I think that we do need to know who we've got in the country. It's possible to get too oppressive about that, but on the other hand, I think in a team we need to know who we are, and I think it's I would veer more towards being able to identify ourselves positively and being responsible citizens, rather than having a lot of people who live in the shadows. But I don't think, I'm not sure if Roy and Nancy have decided on that either. There's the issue of Criminal Records Bureau checks for child protection, and whether DNA banks should be kept, and I just don't know about that. There's also the question of how long people should be allowed to be kept in detention for questioning on suspected of terrorist offences. And there's the issue of reform of the House of Lords, and a lot of people would like an elected House of Lords. The key thing I think to avoid is two opposed, competing, fighting houses of Parliament. and I think it's healthier to have a House of Lords that can delay and question, and the House of Commons. But I think it would be most unfortunate if we had houses of Parliament, parts of the government, warring against each other. The Americans have that system, and I'm not sure, but I don't think it may be seen as a good safeguard, but I think it could be a recipe for paralysis of government. And then there's the issue of devolution of Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. I'd love us to be together and to be affectionate towards each other and to be happy colleagues and influence the world together. But I realise that it's important to do that, obviously, by consent. I'd love to win people to the idea that there's a role for the United Kingdom in the world, and that we should focus on the good that we can do, and the benefits of what we can do together. And then we have recently had a referendum on PR, proportional representation, on one particular scheme of it, which was voted against. The German experience is that proportional representation leads to coalition government, which we've traditionally not liked in this country, because it's seen to lead to weak governments. I mean, it doesn't seem to have made Germany weak, economically at any rate. And there were particular reasons why PR was chosen for Germany by the Allied forces after the Second World War. But the thing that bothers me more is that in various models, not all models of proportional representation, you have a relationship only with a party, with an MP from a list who doesn't have a particular allegiance to you yourself. And I think that wasn't actually the model of PR that was being proposed, but I certainly wouldn't want that, because then you haven't got a really ready access to somebody who's obliged to listen to you if they just are a name off a list. But I would like to know more about people's views about those various legal profession and constitutional issues. Thanks.